Chapter 7. Mumbai, India, 2025. Watching all we have nurtured slip through our fingers is the tragedy of living through these dreadful years. Richard Vaux, Canadian politician, 2160. Larry! Sanjay's voice rang down the whitewashed corridor. Where have you been this weekend, my friend? Pune, called back Larry. That damn ashram again. Sanjay made his way to Larry's office. It was mid-morning, and Mumbai had already suffered another power cut. The extra generators in Vivimus were whirring outside, but they still had to close down the air conditioners. Under Sanjay's white shirt a damp patch of perspiration showed through. He shook Larry's hand. Larry's eyes were downcast and did not meet his. You went by train? Yeah. Second class again? Yeah. Sanjay snorted. I don't understand you sometimes. He was neither angry nor upset, just baffled. I pay you good money. You're a VP in one of the world's fastest-growing biotech companies. On paper, you're already a multimillionaire, and yet you prefer to slum it with filthy beggars and the riffraff. He shook his head. One of Larry's passions was Oriental religions. Whenever time permitted, he would either take the train or plane to spend a weekend at a temple or an ashram. Yet what puzzled Sanjay was his indifference to the manner of travel. Sometimes he would buy a first-class air ticket to Dharamshala, the home of exiled Tibetan Buddhism. Other times he would purchase the cheapest rail ticket, spending hours squashed in some crowded carriage to meet some obscure Hindu sadhu. Sanjay changed tone. Okay, Larry, I got your memo. I know you're pissed. Let's talk. I'm hungry. He gestured Larry to follow him. We'll go and have something outside until the electricity comes back on. As they walked down the stark concrete staircase, a sweeper, an old woman on her haunches, scuttled out of the way of the boss and his American Saab. I'm going to complain to the city authorities, he said, his voice echoing off the whitewashed walls. If they can't maintain a decent supply of electricity, we're moving to London. I hear they're planning to construct a set of futuristic buildings there. The city here just can't cope with 35 million. Outside, their senses were battered by the cacophony and anarchy that is India. Larry could already feel the fumes and dust from the honking lorries and cars crawling by cling to his sweating face. Come on, Larry, now! Sanjay grabbed his arm and, dragging him between the vehicles, negotiated the other side. You might have been here for 3 years, but when you cross roads, you need some old-fashioned Indian fatalism. Get your guru to teach you that. Let's go there, down the alley, he pointed. I know there's a reasonable tea house that makes good jalebis. Quieter too. What are you having? Solicited Sanjay. Meeta pani, garam cha, Pepsi, he said, running down the list. Just hot tea. He could see Larry was anxious. Not often did Larry turn down sweetmeats. Sanjay brought out a folded piece of paper and waved it at him. Your resignation, he sniffed. I'm not going to accept it. As part of the terms and conditions of the sale, Dirk and Sanjay had been locked into Merrick-Perlberg for 2 years. Each had been given a VP's title, and much of Sanjay's time had been spent integrating SCR's technology with that of its new owners. Many of the original staff, including Larry, had drifted away, and when the company had posted a poor quarter's results, Sanjay negotiated for himself a decent severance package. The one thing his year at Merrick's had taught him was that there was no possible way that he could ever develop, test, and launch anti-aging therapies in the States. It was, without doubt, the most litigious country in the world. They were drowning in their own laws, and he returned to Mumbai with $11 million in his bank accounts. Within a month of arriving, he was back in business, working with unsuppressed vigor. His new company's name was Vivimus, and its slogan, Live and L-E-T Live. L-E-T standing for Life Extension Technologies. His uncle lent him a suite of offices, plus laboratories at his pharmaceutical factory. In those early days, Raoul's role was critical. He had business savvy, and even more essential in India, contacts. Vivimus might well have been dead in the water had Raoul not been there to counsel his nephew and help get things done. 3 years later, tragedy struck. Raoul died of a heart attack at the Intercontinental Hotel, Dubai. Only a fortnight later, his only son Ravi, a somewhat dissolute playboy, died from a cocaine overdose on the floor of a beach bungalow in Cochin, in the company of a prostitute. As he had died unmarried, it was Sanjay, as sole heir, who inherited his uncle's estate. Larry looked down at the ground. Sanjay, you don't know how hard it is to work for you sometimes. What do you mean hard? We all work hard, me the most. You know that's not what I mean. The hard work ain't the problem. I just don't know what's going on. You keep... What do you mean you don't know what's going on? He interrupted. You're my vice president of research and development. You're part of my management team. Well, that's just the point. None of us in the management team know. 20 months after returning to India, Sanjay had contacted Larry. Since quitting from Merrick Perlberg, Larry had been drifting. How you doing, Larry? Long time no hear. Fine, Sanjay, bumming around. How about you? Here you're in India. Sure am. Set up a company, Vivimus, doing research on aging. And you'd be amazed to see how much further forward I've come since our days at SCR. Like what? Like, said Sanjay, pausing for suspense. I think I've broken the longevity key. What? Sure. I've got healthy 4-year-old mice running around here, and I'm already testing it on monkeys. Next step is on us humans, but I'd appreciate it if you kept that under your hat for the moment. Of course I will. It was an uncharacteristically unguarded comment on Sanjay's. For a moment Larry was baffled. How could Sanjay have 4-year-old mice when he had been in India for less than 2 years? But let the comment pass. Down the phone, all Sanjay could hear was Larry say, "Wow." It was a slow and pensive wow. Say, if I send you a business class ticket, why don't you fly over to Mumbai and let me show you? Maybe we could work together again. Larry, sighed Sanjay, I've got to protect you. What do you mean, protect me? From who? Larry. Whenever Sanjay said Larry in that way, he knew he was about to be soft-soaked. Look, I know you're a smart guy, one of the smartest. Like me, you're dedicated to our work, making a difference for humanity, right? Sure. He was watching out for the web that he knew Sanjay was about to ensnare him in. This man could dance so dandily you didn't see his feet move. And we know what we're doing is groundbreaking. Out there on the edge, right? Yes. Larry started squeezing his hands together under the table. And that means we've had to take some shortcuts. Seeing Larry frown, Sanjay rolled his eyes and drew a deep breath. I'll explain. But before he could, the boy brought along the tray. Pepsi, he asked. Sanjay raised a finger. Garam cha, said the boy, putting the steaming cup of red tea before Larry. Let me explain, Sanjay went on, and I have to trust you that what I say never gets any further. His black eyes drilled into Larry's, who knew that look of old. I have your word, Larry nodded. As you know, when I arrived in Mumbai, I deliberately set up Vivimus Research and Vivimus Scientific, 2 different operations. Yes, said Larry, 2 different buildings, 2 different systems, each one not knowing. And Vivimus Scientific is doing more of the practical stuff, interrupted Sanjay. You know. Yeah, I know, the mice, the monkeys. Exactly. He took a swig from his Pepsi, frowned and looked over Larry's shoulder. And one more. One more? Yes, one more. What? And humans. Humans? Larry's eyes widened. Keep your voice down. Come on, Larry. I know you're not dumb. You must have guessed something. You must have. Larry appeared cornered, as if fighting with himself. He nodded his head this way and that. I did wonder, he said. And the results are promising, very promising. That's got to be kept secret. That's great. That's just what I came here for. So why am I being shut out of the picture? I want a cut of the action. My team feel we're in a black hole, kept in the dark. Larry, Sanjay hissed. If I told you we lost a fucking human subject last week, what would you say? Larry's jaw dropped, but nothing came out. Sanjay had never used foul language at him before, and a human guinea pig dead too. Larry had joined Vivimus Research as Sanjay's president of research and development. It was an absurdly pretentious title for a startup with absurdly pretentious ambitions. Sanjay had, Larry noticed, grown to be more assertive, which was only to be expected, indeed welcomed, and even his stammer seemed less pronounced. But whereas Dirk Peterson could become a bully to accomplish things, Sanjay would become nasty and spiteful. It was an ugly sight to see him screaming eyeball to eyeball at some hapless lab worker. Larry had once seen him slap his secretary over some trifle, but until this moment Sanjay had at least treated him with his unfailing courtesy. We'll have to pay his family off, of course. They're itinerants, and he won't be missed. We'll be more than generous. He leaned his head back and dropped a syrup-soaked jalebi into his mouth, wiping his sticky fingers on a tissue. I didn't know, bumbled Larry. Well, of course you did. But you were smart enough not to ask. Until now. How many have you lost? Sanjay snarled back. You don't need to know that, do you? Guess not, he said, taken aback. Larry. Sanjay's tone softened. This is what I mean when I say I'm trying to protect you, you and the others. He tried to think of a suitable metaphor. It's like trying to surf a 50-foot wave, like those crazies do in Hawaii. That's us. No time to think or hesitate. We do it or we're dead, understand? Larry nodded. We're committed. Larry nodded again. Sanjay looked at his stunned face and wondered if he was going to burst into tears. That's why I've deliberately kept you in the dark. If the authorities find out about all this, they'll close me down and throw us all in jail. He then adopted a conspiratorial tone. As it stands today, I'm the only one who'll take the bullet. His eyes flickered from side to side. Larry turned and looked over his shoulder, unsure if Sanjay was play-acting or was genuinely worried about being overheard. Surely no one would eavesdrop over the shrill woman warbling out of the ghetto blaster nearby and the cry of the street vendors. What do you mean? I must tell you, we had another attempted break-in over the weekend. I'm going to double the number of chowkidars, night watchmen. I'm taking no chances. Sanjay's forehead furrowed. And not only break-ins. Our computers have been getting hundreds of thousands of hack attacks a day. We've now got firewalls within firewalls. Larry nodded. Any idea who? Sanjay shrugged. Who really knows? We don't have enough cyber forensics. Plenty of professionals do this for others. Competitors, maybe. Your NSA. But we're on somebody's radar screen. Now I think you can appreciate why I want you to keep things separate, why I want to protect you. Okay, said Larry, but Sanjay could see he was still skeptical. And God forbid, sooner or later, I fear someone is going to kidnap me or one of my executives. And believe me, the less you know, the safer you are, my friend. You want to be up there with Crick and Watson, just like I do. One day we're going to be very rich men. I know it, you know it. My mother could read palms, and she told me that as a child. Sounds good, said Larry. It was the first time he recalled Sanjay talking about his mother. What's she doing now? Sanjay hesitated for a second, then ignored the question. Very rich men one day. Means my president of R&D doesn't have to travel second class to meet some first-class holy fool. You should have been a monk, my friend, he remarked, scratching his head. A damn monk. Larry smiled. Well, maybe one day that's what I will become. Sanjay laughed at his naivety. At that moment, a legless beggar boy sitting on a homemade skateboard propelled himself through the traffic and, seeing Larry, mounted the pavement and approached their table. He was grotesque, his upper body scarred white. Clumps of hair sprouted from his bald head and most of his lower jaw had been taken off. Larry recoiled in horror as he tapped on their table, a fingerless claw holding a tin for baksheesh. Sanjay looked at him, and for a moment there was pity in his face. Few people knew that he had funded 2 orphanages. Taking out a roll of grubby notes, he stuffed them into his tin, at the same time swearing at him to clear off. The youngster slunk back, but continued to gaze on impassively. As we walk back to the office, let me go over what we've achieved so far on humans, said Sanjay, getting up and leaving some money under the ashtray. What I'll tell you will blow your mind. By the way, He passed the resignation letter across the table. "I think we can tear this thing up." Larry smiled sheepishly, and scrunching it up, dropped it onto the pavement. "Guess we can." Sanjay sauntered back to the office, a levity in his step. He was pleased with himself. He had achieved what he had set out to achieve. He needed Larry and liked him despite his infuriating ways, but he could never let him go. Not now, for sure. He already knew too much. He would then have to get rid of him, just as he had got rid of his cousin, Ravi. With 3 strokes, the beggar boy had pounced on the tossed piece of paper and as quickly disappeared into the crowd to give it to a man leaning against a lamppost on the other side of the road.